Hello and welcome everyone to a new installment of Collider Connected, Collider's remote interview series. Today I am thrilled to be joined by Better Call Saul executive producer and showrunner Peter Gould. Peter, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Awesome to be here.
How are you doing?
Pretty well, considering the world.
Fair. Well, I have a ton of questions for you. I wanted to start with the most important question, which is how did you come to be writing a Double Dragon movie?
Oh, that's it. That's a deep cut. Double Dragon. I had a close friend of mine who I met in film school, Michael Davis, and we had written we were a one spec script together that was kind of a fun action-y movie. And based on that, the folks who were making Double Dragon thought we'd be the perfect two guys to do a lightning rewrite. And so that was we were very excited. We were almost fresh out of film school at that point, and we did a lightning rewrite on the script, and they mixed and matched our draft with many other drafts from some very, very talented people, and that's how we all got to the Double Dragon that we have today.
It's a curious credit on your resume because, of course, you've now worked on two of the best TV shows of all time, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Double Dragon is just such a weird movie, but I had a super fondness for it as a kid.
I'm glad that you're fond of it. It's a strange movie, and it's a different movie every 3 minutes. So if you don't like the one that you're watching, then 3 minutes from now, a different movie's going to start. So there you go.
Absolutely. Well, so obviously the road to Better Call Saul starts with Breaking Bad. And I know you joined the writing staff of that show in season 1. And Breaking Bad had an interesting evolution itself. I mean, it was on AMC. No one knew that AMC was, running original series. And it took a few seasons for people to really catch up to its greatness. And then obviously, the Emmys and everything. But I was curious what your experience was coming into that writer's room in season 1, kind of what the atmosphere there was.
Well, I was a journeyman writer, but I had never been in a writer's room before. And I was, I knew I really loved the pilot that Vince had written and directed, but I had no idea what to expect. And it was I found out it was a hell of a lot of fun. It was very intimidating at first. Actually, it got more, to be honest with you, it was more intimidating as it went on, because I started realizing that the other writers in the room, George Masteris and Patty Lynn and Jay Roberts, were really good. And then so when my episode kind of came towards the tail end, and so it was I realized I had a lot to live up to, especially, Vince Gilligan is a remarkable human being, and he's a remarkable writer, and he is and I got to appreciate his mind more and more the longer we worked together. So it was really a wonderful experience. It was special. I had no expectations that the show was going to do well when I walked in, but then as we were working on it, I got more and more excited about it, and I thought, there's really nothing else that's been like this. And I think one of the moments that got me most excited was pretty early on in season 1. We started talking about a scene where Walt and Jesse are cleaning up Emilio. Emilio has fallen through the ceiling at Jesse's house due to chemical mishaps, and the two guys are cleaning it up. And we started talking about, Vince did. He started talking about, maybe Walt's thinking about something else, and maybe he's singing a song. We didn't end up doing the song, but that was when we started coming up with this pitch about his cutting back to intercutting Walt's past. And I thought, wow, you can do that on television? I thought that was something that you could only do in movies, I didn't think people were allowed to do that kind of, and this may be stupid on my part, that I hadn't seen a lot of shows that were that, when we say cinematic, sometimes we talk about production value, but when I think of cinematic, it's how the story is told. And that was a remarkable moment for me. And I said, we can do anything that we can think of. And so I think we got bolder and bolder. And I like to think on Better Call Saul, we've gotten bolder still with the kinds of filmic storytelling that we can do to try to tell a story.
That's absolutely one of the things that I think set Breaking Bad apart and sets Better Call Saul apart, is just kind of the craft of it all. What was that experience? I mean, moving into, as you guys were introducing the character of Saul Goodman and Jimmy McGill, how early on did the idea of doing a spinoff come about? And, how early on did it become something that actually could happen as opposed to something you guys were just talking about?
Well, it was, it was a joke at first, because the interesting thing about the Breaking Bad writer's room, the darker the show got, the bleaker, the more cancerous and deathy it got, the more giddy we got in the room and the more silly we got in the room. I think there's a sort of a pendulum effect that when you're working on something that really is dark and frightening in a way, that it's a little bit of whistling in the dark. You kind of make more jokes. And one of the jokes was, well, we'll do this thing that we're talking about is too silly, so we'll do that when we get to the Saul Goodman show. And it really did start out as a joke. And I know Bob's first question to me on the set pretty much was, you guys are going to kill me off pretty fast, right? Because I don't think, he didn't assume that we had big plans for the character. And I pointed out that we had built this really expensive set for his office, and that we were going to try to use it. We ended up using it a lot more than I could have ever expected. And in terms of the show, as it moved on, it was really, I have to say, it seemed too good to be true from my point of view to get to not only do Breaking Bad, which was the creative experience of my life, but then to go on and continue on in that world and to get to explore this goofy character. It seemed too good to be true. And to get to create a show with Vince Gilligan, it just seemed like just too much to ask for. But as time went on, and as Breaking Bad, the final season of Breaking Bad was in post, Vince and I used to take these long walks down the back alley at lunchtime, the back alleys of Burbank, some of the uglier streets in Los Angeles, but somehow very conducive to conversation. And we would just talk about what the show would be. And we got more and more excited. Oh, I have to say probably 85% of the things that we talked about didn't happen. But there's a core of things that we talked about that did happen. And one of the ones that excited me the most right at the beginning was the idea of doing a sort of a midnight run episode with Jimmy and Mike.
Yeah.
And it took us 48 episodes to get there. It wasn't until season 5 that we got there, but we did get there. I'm happy to say.
That's funny that you guys came up with that all the way back then. Well, that was one of my questions is, what was the experience for you like developing this spinoff while also trying to conclude the most esteemed program that was airing at the time in a way that would be satisfying?
Well, when we're the job that we do, at least the way we do it, the way Vince did on Breaking Bad and the way we do it on Better Call Saul, is divided into parts. So there's, breaking the episodes, which in some ways is the moment of most inspiration and the most hair tearing. And then there's production, which is, production. And of course you have to write the episodes, but then, there's post-production. And while we were breaking the show, there was nothing else. You can't think about anything else. And in fact, occasionally the thought drifts through my head that I should be thinking about what I do after this final season of Better Call Saul, but it's so all-consuming to break this. I know there are people who do it another way, and I'm in awe of somebody like Shonda Rhimes who can have so many projects going at the same time and do them all so beautifully. But I'm really more linear in my thinking, and I go one thing at a time. So it really wasn't until we were finishing the last season of Breaking Bad that we were talking about it. And we knew that Breaking Bad had gone well and people liked it a lot. But that final season of Breaking Bad was a once-in-a-lifetime special experience. It was like being a writer on that season of Breaking Bad was like it was probably a little bit like being a roadie for the Beatles. It really, you had there was this tidal wave of interest that I've never seen, certainly any project I've been involved with, but not that many projects ever, I think, have had quite that kind of focus. And it was really special, but that wasn't happening while we were working on this. So we were just you kind of try to put that stuff out of your mind and amuse yourself as much as you can. Is what I would say.
Well, and as I said, throughout the early run of Breaking Bad, the show wasn't this massive worldwide hit yet. And so you guys were able to kind of get yourselves under your feet and kind of create the mechanism that created that kind of incredible storytelling. I know in the early development days of Better Call Saul, or I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there were ideas of doing maybe a half-hour comedy. But now you're creating a show with those expectations. Once you guys got into the nitty-gritty of like, okay, what is Better Call Saul? What was that experience like, and that pressure, and how many different iterations did you go through?
Well, it was, we were in some ways it was the best position you could be in because people were interested in making the show.
Yeah.
Our AMC and Sony were interested in the show and wanted to do it. And I've had, a long career of banging on doors trying to get people to make things. It was a new experience for me to have, be able to get on the phone with the network in the studio and know that they were this receptive. But in our first pitch it was a half hour. It was I think Vince has sometimes called it Dr. Katz, that old animated show from Comedy Central, with different comedians coming in and presenting their problems. And I think we both, at a certain point, realized here's the thing, we wanted it to be different. It had to be different. We had to be doing something different because if we're doing the same thing again, we're never going to top it. Breaking Bad was Breaking Bad. It was complete in and of itself. And people loved it, and that was great. And I think Vince decided to end it while people were still into it and didn't go too long. And but just no way to repeat that. So we wanted to mostly work with him is how is this different from Breaking Bad? That was probably the biggest thing. And of course, I think as the show has gone on, it's gotten more similar, to be honest with you, in some ways. I still think it's completely different, but, probably to an outsider, they start seeing more similarities than differences because they're both dramas that kind of grow from the central character in a similar way. They're both shows that are preoccupied with maybe, I don't know, a certain kind of ethics. I don't know. This is I don't like to talk too thematically, but there are a lot of similarities. And of course, there's some characters who overlap. So, it was, I think at the beginning, mostly concerned, let's make it different. So we're not being compared too much. And then, we've slipped up. Slipped up is probably the wrong word, but
yeah.
You've got a lot of the same group of people all working together, and they tend to make the same sound, even if you add a brass section.
Well, as you call it, the Midnight Run episode that aired this past season was just incredible, and that is probably very similar to Breaking Bad. But the world you guys built and the relationship you built between Jimmy and Mike, I mean, it's different. Like you have a different emotional connection to these characters.
That's absolutely true. The whole constellation of characters is unique and interesting, and it's so fascinating. I mean, of course, we have the advantage of working with these amazing actors. You can't beat the group, and of learning from them about the characters from watching their performances. And, when you watch Jonathan Banks, he brings the whole backstory. He's got his own idea, but the backstory is on the character. But he brings, just a lifetime of self-hatred to the character. And it's very provocative as a writer to get to work with all these guys, with Bob and Ray and Patrick and Giancarlo. You get to explore these characters. And now we also have new characters too, which is, it's an interesting mix. We have a character like Kim Wexler, Ray Seahorn's character, or Tony Dalton's character, or Michael Nando's character, where we get to we get to explore completely uncharted territory. It's just a different feel.
Well, and as you say, going back to kind of the beginning of the show and making it different, I would say, I mean, I think it's absolutely one of the best shows on television. It's one of my favorite shows, but it does feel like it's the story now that we're getting towards the end is told in two halves, and the core of that first half is Jimmy and Chuck. And I'm curious, the idea of bringing in a brother and just that perfect casting, how much did you know of the Chuck storyline as you guys were working in season one, and how much of it was finding it as kind of it went along and watching those actors play together?
You know, it is. The glory of this is discovery with watching what's already been shot, thinking about what's already been written and trying to build on it. And I think when we came up with Chuck, I was just an image that, you know, who is Jimmy's closest relative, and does he have a relative, and who does he feel responsible to and responsible for? And I think at the beginning, Chuck was more of a burden to Jimmy. That was our idea, was he's going to be somebody, and we were looking to try to give a dimension to Jimmy. That was our big struggle at the beginning, because, you know, we thought we knew who Saul Goodman was, but the part of Saul Goodman we saw on Breaking Bad was really a persona. And the question is, it's a weird thing to have to work backwards from a persona and say, well, what's beneath that mask? You know, and why did you make that mask to begin with? And what's the point of that mask? And having a character who knew Jimmy as Chuck did really helped to kind of make him more human. And as for how much we knew, I don't think we had a single idea really of how it was going to go until, and I remember it was a big moment for me to watch the first scene with Chuck and Jimmy, which was a scene that Vince was directing, and I think I had mostly written that scene, the introduction to Chuck. And the two actors were electric together, but there was something that Michael McKean brought to the character that I didn't completely understand when writing it. Although it was there, I think, in the text, I didn't understand it, which was his pride, and his pride in his accomplishments and in his brain, and also the fear of being helpless. And we asked ourselves, I remember coming back from Albuquerque where that episode was being shot, and we asked ourselves a question which we hadn't asked. We said, we know what being Chuck's brother is like, but what is being Jimmy's brother like for Chuck? How does Chuck see it? And that ended up driving that really simple question, which you might think maybe we should have asked quite a bit sooner. That really simple question ended up driving the story for, you know, a lot of the story for really the whole story. Because I don't think Jimmy would be the man he's become in season 5 without Chuck, and without the experience of having Chuck as a brother, and without the experience of having his heart broken by Chuck so deeply. And I think the story of those two brothers is a tragedy, because I think in a weird way, and I think this is true in families, sometimes the people you've known the longest don't really know you. You know, they know what you are in their lives, but they don't know you in another way. And I don't think Chuck believed that Jimmy could grow and change, and it's become kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. I do, you know, comparing Breaking Bad with Better Call Saul, it feels like Breaking Bad is kind of a little bit like this villain origin story where Walt just gets worse and worse and worse. Whereas this Better Call Saul feels like the tragedy of Jimmy McGill. Like, he tries to do the right thing over and over and over again and just cannot help himself or other people get in his way. There is this tragic undertone to everything that happens in the show, which makes it so heartbreaking.
Yeah, Adam, I think that's part of the essence of it being a prequel, because I think because you do know so much about where the character's going. Mm-hmm. That's, you know, if somebody was bringing this, somebody who's more educated than I am, brought this up the other day, which is that in Shakespeare, I'm not comparing us to Shakespeare, to be clear, that often there's somebody who comes out at the beginning and tells you, this is the story you're going to see. You're going to see how Macbeth does such and so, and so on. And in a weird way, knowing where things are headed, instead of taking the tension out, adds the tension. I don't know. It's complex.
Yeah.
It's for bigger minds than mine.
Well, and something that there's this idea in fandom, and I don't know if it's in creatives as well, but this idea that things have to be planned out from advance in order for them to work. And my go-to answer for that is always Breaking Bad, because Vince always talked about how you guys would write yourselves into a corner and you would have to figure out how to get there. But you wouldn't necessarily know how you're going to get out of the corner. You would commit to it and then figure it out from there. The story you just told about, Jimmy and his brother is a prime example. And, I was just curious how that process manifests for you. Is that something that you guys have continually found fruitful, as not trying to commit too far in advance to stuff?
Well, we do talk ahead a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk all the time. Where is this going? How do we end this show? How do we end this season? What happens? But I've learned not to fall in love too deeply with any of those big ideas, because there's always something different that comes up. And usually what's different that comes up is that the characters don't necessarily want to do the things that you'd like them to do to make the story work the way you think it should. And so usually we've really tried to be disciplined about not forcing things to happen. Because, you may have an image like that one I talked about earlier, doing a midnight run episode. I think the original idea was that Mike and Jimmy get handcuffed or ankle cuffed together and have to get through the desert. And this was an idea we had before we shot a frame of season 1.
Yeah.
Because, we had these two amazing actors, and they're like peanut butter and chocolate. They're just great together. But if we had tried to do that season 1, we could have put a card up season 1. Okay, episode 7, season 1. The two guys get stuck in the desert. But, if you try to force that to happen, if you try to say, well, maybe he's not ready to do this, but we'll just go ahead and do it anyway. As soon as you start making those compromises, that's when this character stops making sense. And that's when you can feel the hand of the author moving people around like chess pieces. And I do think, it's a different, there's a million ways to do this. And I'm sure that there's a version where you do exactly that. You put it up to episode 7 and it works. But just in my personal experience, the trick, and this is true all of creativity, you have to be open to things that don't fit your preconceptions. And that certainly goes in every area. It goes with the actors. The actors aren't going to necessarily interpret the characters the way you're expecting. And the DP may not like the scene the way you're expecting. And the composer may have an idea about putting the music in a different place. And you always have the option of arguing and of saying, no, it's got to be this way. But most of the time, the goal is to cultivate creativity, not to crush it.
Well, and I think it's worked out tremendously for you guys, but of course you're heading into the home stretch here and moving into season 5, which I just thought was tremendous. I mean, again, if Jimmy and Chuck is the heart of the first half of the show, Jimmy and Kim is the heart of the second half of the show. And Kim is the key, and we've all assumed this whole time that Jimmy is going to corrupt Kim, and that's going to be devastating. And in the finale, she does those finger guns, and your heart just breaks because it feels as though maybe Kim was corrupt all along. Maybe she's the one who's trying to hide her real self. I was wondering kind of how did you guys come upon that finger gun moment and, the figuring out Kim's arc for this season and heading into kind of the home stretch?
Yeah, boy, what a great question. I think it's really hard to trace back bit by bit, but Kim Wexler starts the season not really understanding or liking Saul Goodman. Mm-hmm. But we do know that I think she's a very complex character. There's a lot to her. She is a really good lawyer. And we've learned that over and over again, that she's probably the best lawyer on the show, including Chuck, really. She's the one who's able to come up with the best arguments. She's the one who sees things clearly. But she also has a soft spot for the scam, a soft spot for deception. And if you think about, lawyers, what they do is to lead people down a logical path. And she's great at leading down a logical path that leads to justice. But she's also great at leading people down a path of her own devising. And I think she's gotten a taste for it. But I also think something else has happened. And I don't personally think that she grew up bad or that she's inherently bad. But I think she's become disillusioned. I think she's become disillusioned by the law. I think she is somebody who wanted success so much. She climbed her way out of the mailroom at HHM and became an attorney and became an associate, and then got on the partner track at a firm. And she just worked so hard to get there. And then she found herself working for a bank, which was very lucrative. But working for the bank sometimes means you have to do things that may be legal that aren't right. And that's the tough thing. I think that's the tough thing, is that, it's where is the right thing to do? And I think that she's come to the conclusion that sometimes maybe cutting corners to do something that she knows in her heart is the correct thing or the right thing is the way to live, or a good way to live. And we're going to find out if that's true. At the end of the season, she doesn't just say, let's make a lot of money. She has just seen that she just had her face. I think she always knew it. She had her face rubbed in the fact that the legal system in this world is very, very unfair, that rich people and banks get very different representation, have a very different legal system from ordinary people or people without resources. And I think that she wants to do good, but is it possible? Is it possible to do good by doing bad? Is Robin Hood a reasonable role model for Kim Wexler? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, and Jimmy it seems like Kim has always been this, as much as Jimmy slips, Kim is always the moral center, and she's going to pull him back. And so that look of devastation on Jimmy's face when she does the finger guns, when she's like, wouldn't I be fine with this, is just tremendous. That whole moment is perfect.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. It's so scary to end the season that way, because in some ways it's a very subtle moment.
Yeah.
It's a more subtle moment than some of the season enders that we've done. And I was always a little worried that people wouldn't understand how momentous that was. And so when you say that, it makes me feel great.
Well, and one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about, and this is something I've been talking about this show for years, is the craft is impeccable. It's probably the best directed show on TV. And, I've interviewed Dave Porter, and, in conversing with him, the fact that this is the same team that made Breaking Bad that has just gotten better and better and better at their craft. I was wondering if you could kind of talk about, the whole package of the show, the cinematography, the shot design, the direction, the performances, everything is like the top level that you could expect.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. It is a great, wonderful. The team has changed since Breaking Bad. Absolutely. We have Marshall Adams is our director of photography, and he did shoot, I think, one episode of Breaking Bad, but he was not part of that team. But the truth is that everybody, it's a group of storytellers, and everyone's focus is not on the razzle dazzle necessarily, or making themselves look good. It's about telling the story, and that's our hope, is that's what makes it great directing or great cinematography, is that we're telling the story in the most clear, interesting way that we know how. And I think that by keeping the focus on that, if you keep the focus on the story, then everything else kind of comes in train behind it. And I think that's where the style comes, and it's where everything else does. And, we also have the advantage, Dave Porter, he has been with the show since the pilot of Breaking Bad. And he is a remarkable talent. And there are throughout, there's the prop department, which is more or less the same for all these seasons. But then there is always new people. And it's a perfect combination, because you do want to mix it up a little bit. You don't want to have the same people doing the same job for 13 years straight. And part of the reason for that is you want people to be excited and get opportunities. So, it's the reason we like promoting people from within as much as we can, because you get a different level of excitement from folks who are getting to the job that they really want to do. And I'm a great example of that, because I started on Breaking Bad as I think executive story editor, and now I get to be a showrunner, and it's a dream come true. So in terms of the craft, and we absolutely have directors. We're blessed with having some writer directors like Vince and Gordon Smith and me and Tom Schnauz. And there are also people like Michelle McLaren who've come back, thank God, from the Breaking Bad world. But there are also new directors who we haven't worked with as much, like Minky Spiro, who are just tremendous, talented people who bring their own vision to it. Because that's the other thing about it, is you want to evolve the show. You don't want to say, this is the show we're doing. It's got to look like this. It's got to sound like this. This is the kind of music we use. These are the cuts that we do. And this is the camera style. This is what it is. Do this. That's not the way to get. That's not the way to get a creative approach. And so what we try to do, hopefully, is get each director, each cinematographer, each camera operator, they all bring their own points of view to it, and hopefully add to the whole piece.
I think what's striking about it is the precision. It's kind of this no shot wasted idea. Whereas a lot of television, sometimes the visuals are maybe a second thought or an afterthought. But, and you guys, when creating the show, which in the beginning was frankly just people thumbing through folders and papers and talking, you make it cinematic. But it's the precision. Again, it's, every shot tells a story. And I think that's something that really sets the show apart.
I think that's, well, I have to also give big tribute to Kelly Dixon and Skip McDonald and Chris McCaleb, the three editors who cut almost every episode, because they really do have that's our hope, is that there's no cut that's just there to have a cut, that the cuts are all there for a reason. And that's one of the things that I think that's underestimated, how important editing is to the things that you're talking about, because you can do everything right on set and everything right in the writer's room, and still not have it sing because it's not cut right. And the other thing, of course, is that we try to write scripts that are visual. So that's we're always asking ourselves how can we do this scene with less or no dialogue, which might seem like a weird thing for writers to ask.
Yeah. Well, it works tremendously well. I have a million more questions for you, but I do want to ask. I wanted to talk about kind of bringing Gus Fring in, who obviously is the notorious antagonist in Breaking Bad, but he's not necessarily an antagonist here. He is working a bit as an ally of Mike, kind of threading in that Breaking Bad world in Better Call Saul, but then also bringing in Lalo as, it seems to suggest we're setting Lalo up as the primary antagonist for the final season. I'm kind of curious how you guys came upon those antagonists, because obviously there's the internal conflict within Jimmy and within Kim, but then you also have these very real, very violent threats.
Wow. It's, when you have an actor like Giancarlo Esposito, boy, we were just at home. We were just watching Do the Right Thing. And he's so fantastic in that. He's so fantastic every movie he's in. And he's such a subtle actor and such a wonderful collaborator. He really is a special actor. And so to have him on the show meant a lot. Now, Gus Fring is a tricky character to write. He is very difficult. I'm sure he's difficult to act too, but he's difficult to write because he does not disclose what's going on with him easily. And he has a very calm affect, but there's a storm going on under there. And he's also brilliant. And I gotta say, writing smart characters is very difficult. especially for somebody who's, maybe we're smart, maybe we're not, but he's so smart. It's very hard for him to have a problem. And so we needed an antagonist who was worthy of him. And that was part of the reason for the creation of Tony Dalton's character, Lala Salamanca, who was named briefly, name checked on Breaking Bad.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought about Lala, we thought, well, what's a different breed of cat from the one that we've seen before? What's a different approach that we haven't seen? And we just thought of this guy who's enjoying himself. He takes pleasure in life. He takes pleasure in his abilities. He is a cold-blooded murderer also, but that doesn't mean he can't enjoy life. And and Tony makes him into kind of a cartel Errol Flynn. If that's not too, he's dashing, he's handsome, he's perceptive, and he is every inch a worthy opponent for Gustavo Fring and for Mike Ehrmantraut. Let's not forget, because Mike also, you want to talk about difficult characters to write. Mike is endlessly fascinating. He's a complex character, but he's also so great at his job that, again, it's very hard to write sometimes. It makes me think, it makes me think, and I'm not a comic book expert, but, in the early days of Superman, they had that problem where Superman started getting so strong that there was really nothing for him to do.
Yeah.
And so hence kryptonite. So, we don't have, unfortunately, there's no kryptonite in our world that we can't put a bar of kryptonite next to Mike or to Gus to weaken them, to get them into trouble. So we have to have, maybe Lala Salamanca is the next best thing to kryptonite.
Yeah. Well, it certainly sets up a really fascinating final season for you guys here. I know you guys have talked about Walt and Jesse will probably show up at some point. Now it's the end. Where are you guys kind of in the process of season 6? Have you decided if Walt and Jesse are coming back? Have you figured out how Gene fits into it all, and that kind of flash forward storyline?
Well, we're continuing to work. We didn't really miss a day in spite of the pandemic. We went from a Friday in the room together to a Monday on Zoom. And so we're all working. And by the way, Vince hadn't been in the room for the last few seasons, and he's come back, and he's on fire in the room. And there's so many great big ideas that we have, and so many wonderful scenes. And right now I think we're pretty close to finishing episode 4, and we have an idea for everything that you asked about. We have an idea of where we think this is going, what ends all this. We have an idea about characters who might or might not return, like Walt and Jesse. We have thoughts, but as we said earlier in the conversation, you don't want to commit to anything too much because things change, and if the story zigs or zags in a way that makes it impossible for us to have even beloved characters back, we won't have them back, because our goal is to have a story that makes sense on its own and is not dependent on those references or that. But having said that, I got to be in Albuquerque, actually. I made a point of flying to Albuquerque with my family for one day of the El Camino shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, Brian flew in secretly, and there was Aaron, and they were in that, I'm sure you've seen El Camino, that great scene in the diner that Vince wrote and directed. And we spent a day watching these two guys, and then we had dinner together. And it was such a special thing to see those two guys as those characters again. They are unique. They're bigger than life. It was such a terrific scene. I like to think that we don't have as much of an obligation to have Walt and Jesse back on Better Call Saul, because there's such a great appearance on in El Camino. But having said that, I would love to have them back. I'd love to have Brian direct an episode.
Yeah,
I got to write an episode that Brian directed, and I was there on set with him every day. And it was a wonderful experience. He is a magnificent director. He's one of the few directors who has a facility for comedy, and for the lightest comedy and the darkest drama, and can flip back and forth. He's remarkable. He's a great guy. I'd love to work with both of them. And Aaron Paul is possibly the happiest human being I've ever met, and he makes everybody around him happy. So yeah, I would love to have them back.
I think fans would love to see them back. I know you have to go. Well, one last question for you. I was kind of curious. I know the final season is more episodes than you guys usually have. I was kind of curious what the decision was behind that. I'm not complaining. Love to see more.
Well, it's really it's a thumbnail, and we talked about it a lot. And one of the concerns I had was I kept saying, I barely survive physically making it through 10 episodes. How are we going to do 13? And then, Tom Schnauz said to me, you'll know it's the last 13. So, you'll see the barn door in the barn in the distance. You'll be like the horse that gallops down the last bit. And so I took that. But we also have a lot to do. We have a lot of story. And so it's a little bit of a guess, to be honest with you. What's the right number? Is it 9? Is it 16? Is it, is it 10? 10 doesn't seem like enough. I don't think we're physically capable of making 15. And it would probably take so long that everyone would be bored with waiting for us. So I think, we kind of settled on 13, and I have to say, here we are breaking episode 4. I think it's the right number. And I'm really hoping that we stick the landing. People are really tough on series enders now. Yeah. That's what the thing. It's making me a little nervous. It's making me a little nervous because people are very. It makes me realize, watching all the shows that have a series ending, and then getting a little look at the different opinions about it. It's very tough to take. In our case, it'll be 63 hours roughly of story, and then run it to a satisfying conclusion. And then plus we have the Breaking Bad of it. So I know my hair is going to fall out in the next 5 seconds talking about it. We'll do our best. I'm excited. I
have nothing but the utmost faith in you. I can't remember who said it, but it's something along the lines of series finales are a chance for the writers and showrunners to tell you what story they've been telling all along. And I think up until now, you've been on the same exact wavelength with the fans. So.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And I have to also give a big shout out to Bob Odenkirk, because we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here without that guy. And he's not only a talent, but he's also just a wonderful, wonderful guy. So I just want to make sure we mention his name before we're done.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like, it goes without saying, him and Ray are just spectacular. They should win all the awards. So hopefully.
I agree.
Yes. Here's hoping. Well, thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on the run so far. Seriously, this is really one of the best television shows that's ever been made. It's not just a spinoff or, an afterthought of Breaking Bad. It has stood on its own as just a really spectacular piece of storytelling.
Well, thank you so much for that. It means a lot, and we're just doing our best, and hopefully you'll say the same thing after you see the final season.
I hope so as well. Well, good luck.
Okay. All right. You take care.